Yo, what is up guys? Welcome back to Andy's Reviews, and today we are going to be reviewing and ranking the entirety of the MCU from best to worst, including all of the Marvel MCU movies, Disney Plus shows, Marvel Netflix shows, as well as anything associated with the Sony Spider-Man universe. So let's get into it. But before I begin, I have to say that this channel will be undergoing some major scheduling conflicts for the next couple of weeks, especially with school now starting, where I will now be uploading every other Friday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so stay tuned for those videos. But I do have to say that Out of Theater reactions will be up as soon as possible once the movie releases. But other than that, let's just go back to the video. Which of course brings us into our next main movie, Avengers Endgame. To be completely honest with you, this movie was absolutely incredible from beginning to end. I had the opportunity of watching this movie opening night, and let me tell you that the fan screams and reactions during this movie were absolutely incredible. This movie was full of a bunch of fan service that actually worked, actually had an impact in a movie for once. And honestly, this movie was absolutely incredible. It was awesome seeing Captain America wield Mjolnir for the first time, and Thor being like, "I knew it." Honestly, this movie was filled with a bunch of fan service, and I have to say that it was awesome seeing both the characters of Iron Man, played by Robert Downey Jr., and Captain America, played by Chris Evans, finally reach a genuine conclusion to their arc. So basically, in this movie, we got to see Iron Man die in the most heroic way possible, and thus bringing an end to his hero's journey of being an arrogant, narcissistic person from the first Iron Man movie, and all the way to him becoming a selfless, heroic, and of course, mission-driven person by the end of Avengers Endgame. Honestly, his character arc and hero's journey was absolutely incredible. And I also have to say that Chris Evans' Captain America also had a very good ending in the way that he was finally able to go back in time and spend the rest of his life being with the love of his life, known as P. Carter. Honestly, that ending was absolutely incredible and very heartwarming. But other than that, this movie was absolutely incredible. The action was incredible, and therefore, this movie deserves a solid S tier ranking on this list, right behind Captain America Civil War. Which of course brings us into our next main movie, Guardians of the Galaxy 2014. To be completely honest with you, Marvel and James Gunn did an amazing job introducing us to the space galactic world of Marvel, and honestly, it was absolutely incredible seeing the Guardians of the Galaxy for the first time, who at the time were relatively unknown characters to the general audience. Honestly, didn't know who they were, but I have to say that James Gunn was able to successfully make us all fall in love with these unknown bandits of fugitives. And honestly, it was incredible seeing these weird people get together for the very first time and actually save the galaxy together as a team. Honestly, it was absolutely incredible, and I have to say that the Nova Corps and their design of their home planet of Xandar was also absolutely incredible. And honestly, I have to give props to James Gunn for being able to come up with the design for space in the MCU and how he was able to create a unique feel and distinct tone for the vastness of space. It was all absolutely incredible. But I do have to say that the villain of this movie is absolutely forgettable. His name was Ronan the Accuser, and honestly, he did little to no evil in this film. All he did was basically almost destroy the planet of Xandar. But other than that, this villain was absolutely useless. And therefore, this movie deserves a solid A tier ranking on this list, ahead of Captain America, the First Avenger. And of course, our next movie up is of course Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. To be completely honest with you, I believe that this movie was the worst movie in the entire Guardians of the Galaxy franchise, especially considering how this movie really gets rid of the space exploration element we get to see in the other two films. So basically in this whole movie, we all get to visit two planets. One was the home of the yellowish people, where we got to see the people associated with Adam Warlock, and the other planet being Ego's planet. To be completely honest with you, Ego's planet was absolutely horrible in my own opinion. It was super bland, boring, and I really didn't like it. But I did enjoy the relationship between Ego, played by Kurt Russell, as well as Star-Lord, played by Chris Pratt. It was still pretty good, the relationship. But honestly, I really missed the space exploration aspect of these films that was present in the other two films. And honestly, I really feel that actually dinged some points for this movie. But I still have to say that this movie is pretty good in regards to comedy, and I really feel that James Gunn really knows how to hit the comedic moments in the movie. And honestly, the chemistry between the Guardians of the Galaxy is still incredible, but honestly, this movie just felt dull in my opinion, and therefore, this movie deserves a solid C ranking on this tier list. Which of course brings us into our next main movie. Our next movie up is of course Spider-Man Far From Home. To be completely honest with you, this movie is a good sequel in the Tom Holland Spider-Man trilogy, and in my completely honest opinion, this movie was pretty decent in regards to the villain. Honestly, Mysterio has to be one of the top 10 MCU villains in my own personal opinion, especially with the CGI effects that the CGI team that created this movie gave Mysterio. Honestly, all the visual effects associated with Mysterio were absolutely incredible, especially the nightmare sequence where we get to see Peter experience the hallucinations of Mysterio right before he gets hit by a train. And honestly, the hallucinations and the idea of Mysterio was absolutely incredible, especially considering how Jake Gyllenhaal did an amazing job in being a villain and a friendly friend towards the beginning part of the movie. And honestly, Jake Gyllenhaal stole the show in the entirety of this movie and every scene he was in. And overall, I would say that this movie is still a very enjoyable movie in regards to the comedy elements, the teenager elements, especially the way where we get to visit different parts of Europe. That's absolutely incredible. And honestly, I can barely think of any critiques of this movie besides the cliffhanger ending, which was pretty good in my opinion. But if you're not into cliffhanger endings, that's some points off for you guys. But honestly, this movie is pretty enjoyable. And therefore, this movie deserves an A-tier ranking right behind Captain America: The First Avenger. Which of course brings us into our next main movie, 2008's The Incredible Hulk. To be completely honest with you, this movie is pretty forgettable, but I do have to admit that Edward Norton was a unique person to be casted as Hulk, and honestly, his character in this movie was pretty quite memorable, especially his romantic relationship between him and Betty Ross. It was still pretty good and watchable, but I do have to say that the final battle in this movie was absolutely incredible, especially the final battle between Hulk and Abomination. Honestly, that fight has to be one of the best MCU fights in the entire cinematic universe. But besides that, this movie is pretty forgettable, besides the fact that this movie has William Hurt, who plays General Ross. Honestly, William Hurt as General Ross has to be one of the best MCU castings I've ever seen. Honestly, his performance was absolutely incredible, especially during Captain America: Civil War, where we got to see him talk to the actual Avengers about the Sokovia Accords, which put a ban on the Avengers, where they could only be used for world-threatening emergencies under government supervision and control, which caused the whole fight we got to see in that movie. And honestly, William Hurt was down in this movie. But besides that, this movie is pretty forgettable and therefore deserves a C-tier ranking right behind Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Which of course brings us into our next main movie, Iron Man 2. To be completely honest with you, this movie is pretty good. It's a good, enjoyable watch. I especially love the way that Jon Favreau decided to give Tony Stark his alcoholic vibes from the comics. Honestly, that plot was super undeveloped in this movie, but I did enjoy seeing some elements of that, especially during the party sequence where Iron Man fights Rhodey. Honestly, that sequence has to be one of the highlights of this movie. Oh, and don't even get me started on Justin Hammer, played by this dude. Honestly, Justin Hammer has to be one of the most underrated villains in the entire MCU, and I hope that they bring him back for Armor Wars, which is coming out in a couple of years, hopefully. Honestly, Justin Hammer was absolutely incredible. He was basically a knockoff of Tony Stark, but who was still rich, but you get what I mean. He gave Tony Stark wannabe vibes, and honestly, Whiplash was pretty good, to be honest. He's a Russian villain who I did enjoy watching these movies. But other than that, I would say this movie is pretty good, except the fact that this movie has a bunch of plot lines, and where the main plot line is actually covered up with a bunch of setup for the Avengers movie that was going to come out the year after this movie. But other than that, this movie is pretty good, enjoyable watch, and therefore, this movie deserves a solid B-tier ranking on this list, right ahead of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Well, that's the end of part 2 of this amazing ranking. Please feel free to drop a comment down below letting me know your thoughts about this ranking. Also, please feel free to drop your own ranking of the MCU down below. I would love to analyze yours, and honestly, I would like to start a conversation down below as to your guys' ranking. And don't forget to drop a like on this video, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to help out the channel. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next video. And by the way, please feel free to drop some criticism on these videos down in the comments. I would actually appreciate that, since I'm trying to make these the best YouTube videos possible. And yeah, I would really appreciate that. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next video once again.